Hi, this is Carrie Shell from On Point Quilter. This is block 3 in our fall quilt series, and this one is entitled L is for Luscious. Within Minnesota, we have lots of apples during this time of the year, and so I needed to feature that in this particular quilt. Okay, we're going to start by finding an applique of an apple to use in this stitch. So I'm going to go to my libraries and I'm going to go to the block library and I'm going to do a search by note card and I'm going to do apple and I'll do a search. And there's a lot because there's all these pineapple blocks, which I don't really care about, but I'm going to scroll over until I find an apple that I like. And this apple here actually is available in the Contemporary Applique folder, so I know that you will all have access to this as well. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to my sketchbook and close that. Now, if I view my sketchbook and I go to the Blocks tab, I can see the apple motif and I'm going to select Edit. Now, because I am going to be doing this in the stitch, I'm going to just go to this Applique tab. I'm going to select it all. So I'm going to use the Pick tool, do a Control A to select it, do a Control C to copy, and then I'm going to go to the Work on Stitching and I'm going to do a Control V to paste. Now that looks a little large, so I'm going to start by resizing. So I'm going to right click, click on resize, and let me try 80% and see where that ends up. And I think that looks pretty good. Might want to make it just a little bit bigger, so I'll say 105% on that. So I want to make a couple of modifications to make this a little bit easier in terms of stitching. So the first thing is I'm going to use the Pick tool, select my leaf. I'm going to move that a little bit and I'm going to use the Control key, click on the center, and I'm going to rotate the leaf a bit also. And remember that around all of this will be an edge stitch, so I want a little bit of space for that edge stitch so I'm not completely overlapping everything. The other thing is for that stem. One of the things I realized last week was the edge stitch and the fill stitch and everything ended up being very bulky. And so in order to make it less bulky, I'm going to separate the edge stitch from the fill stitch and I'm going to cut off some of the edge stitch. So I'm going to first just pick this and I'm going to do a Control C and a Control V to copy and paste it. And now I'm going to cut off the bottom. So I'm going to use the Shape tool. I'm going to select this line. I need to add a node and I'm going to move that node down a bit. And then on the same thing, I'm going to add a node, move it down, and I can now break the curve. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one, break the curve. So now I've got two pieces. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to delete it. And for this one, I'm going to move it in place and I'm going to zoom here a bit with this plus key so I can get it right on top of the other one. And then with my Shape tool, I'm going to just have it go slightly into that apple. And for the other one, I'm going to take the box and I'm going to just shorten that a bit as well because I don't really need my fill extending quite as far as what it is doing. So it looks like I have one shape, but I actually have two shapes. I'm just going to go ahead and add this to the sketchbook. I'm going to view my sketchbook, I'm going to go to my stitching, and I'm going to find all of my letters. And I had typed out fall previously, so I'm just going to edit that. And I'm going to select the L, and I'm going to do a Control C, and that will copy it. View my sketchbook, find my apple, select Edit, and I'm going to do a Control V to paste. So that brings in the L. That definitely needs to be resized as well. So I'm going to right click, resize. I'm going to try about 250% on this one to start. And the reason I'm doing the percentage versus just dragging the corner is I want to keep my proportions. And that, I think, is a better proportion, although now I may want to move my apple down a bit, so I'll just drag a block over all of those shapes and move them down. I think I am ready to add stitches. So I'm going to go to the Stitch tab. Can first of all set my thread colors. And I can do that both for the edge stitches and the background fill. And I think for the leaf, I'm just going to make them the same. And the same for the stem. And let me zoom in on the stem because I'm seeing one of my problems is I can't actually see both shapes. So I'm going to go back to artwork for a minute, and just for the purposes of getting some of this done, I'm going to just move that over, and now I can go ahead and color that as well. And now I need to adjust my fills. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Set Fill Stitch. And for the leaf, so I'm going to start with that leaf there. I could have started any place, but I am going to select Wide Whale. And I am going to rotate that 45 degrees. And I'm going to click on that. Now it almost looks like there are veins running through the leaf, so I really liked that. Since I'm on that leaf, I'm going to go ahead and click on the edge stitch as well. And I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller. The default is 3. I'm going to go ahead and change that to 2.5 and click on that. So I can see a little bit more of the fill in there. And then for my stem, I am going to first of all set the edge stitch, and for the fill one, I'm going to click on that, and I want to actually turn that off. So I'm going to click on No Edge and click on that, and now I am just seeing the fill. So now I can go ahead and color the fill. Now I'm going to adjust the edge stitch for the partial stem block. The steel stitch on 2.5, click on it, and that will make it a little bit smaller. Now I do want to move this back underneath, so I'm going to go back to the artwork tab. I'm going to pick it, and I'm going to move that right on top like that. And hopefully that means it moved there as well. Now for the apple, I am going to change the fill for that. I do love some of these fills that EQ has built in. So I'm going to do a Set Fill Stitch. And for this one, I'm going to do an all over. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I think it gives me an interesting fill to work with. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to get that stem underneath the rest of what I'm working on. So I'm going to select the Move Up Down, and notice that it shows the order everything is going to stitch in. So for the fill, I'm going to first of all move that to the bottom, and for the outline, I'm going to move that to the bottom, but I'm going to move it up just one so that it's right on top of the fill. Next, I want to simulate sewing. And I'm going to add that to the sketchbook. Now, one other thing that I thought would be useful would be to actually put a basting block around all of this. And because I realized the first time I actually tried to sew this out, I had some puckering on my fabric. So I'm going to go back to the Artwork tab, and in the shapes, I'm going to select the polygon tool there, and I'm going to select a box, and I'm just going to drag a box. I'm going to go to my Stitch tab, and to create a basting block, I need to first of all, on the fill stitch, I don't want any fill, so I'm going to select no fill and select it. For the edge stitch, select the edge stitch, and I'm going to select a running stitch, and I'm going to make it 8 millimeters for the length. So I want it to be fairly loose so it's easy to take out later. And I'll click on the box, and I now have a running stitch. Now I do need to select my move up and down again, and I need to move that to the very bottom so it is the first thing stitched. So I will add that to my sketchbook as well. And then under stitching, I will export my stitching file, and I'm going to call this one L Apple, and I can now transfer it to my machine and do the actual stitch out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like other videos related to Electric Quilt, please subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.onpointquilter.com.